All right, guys, we are going to be getting into an introduction to ecology. Now, levels of organization within the biosphere. There are different levels of organization that comprise our biosphere. So, the parts of the earth is where life exists. That's what the biosphere is. Now, within the biosphere are biomes. Biomes are groups of ecosystems with a similar climate. A few kinds of biomes that we have is the rainforest, the tango, the temperate deciduous forest, the grasslands, the desert, and the tundra. Now, within biomes, we can find many different ecosystems, which an ecosystem is all of the living and non-living components of an area. Now, all the various populations in an area that interact will make up a community. A population is a group of the same species that can interbreed and still have fertile offspring. So, a species includes all of these similar organisms which can interbreed and still produce viable offspring. Now, ecology is the study of the interactions among organisms and their environments. So, an ecosystem is an area where these interactions take place. So, an ecosystem is comprised of biotic and abiotic factors. Now, abiotic is considered non-living. So, examples of this would be air, water, temperature, and sunlight. Now, your biotic factors are living, and examples of this would be trees, plants, insects, and bacteria. There are many different ecosystems that will also exist within our biosphere. We have aquatic ecosystems, which includes our oceans, lakes, rivers, streams, and all our wetlands. While we also have a terrestrial ecosystem, which are land-based and include the tundra, the taigas, the temperate deciduous forests, tropical rainforests, grasslands, and desert. So large geographic areas with similar climates and ecosystems are called biomes. There are also different interactions within the environment. Biodiversity is the variety of organisms in an ecosystem. How could you describe the biodiversity in these two ecosystems, and how do they compare in terms of biodiversity? An organism in any living thing within an ecosystem. The place where an organism obtains the food, shelter, and moisture and temperature levels that it needs is called its habitat. So, the unique role or job of an organism in its environment is called its niche. So, down here in our pictures, we have an example of lichen. Lichen is just one example of an organism. So, lichens can be found on trees in the forest. The trees in the forest are considered the lichen's habitat. Now, when a lichen dies, they will contribute organic matter to the soil, improving the soil so other plants can grow there. That is its role or its job in the ecosystem. All organisms rely on other organisms for energy. The transfer of energy from one ecosystem to another is called the energy flow through an ecosystem. And we can trace that path of energy through an ecosystem with an energy pyramid. So an energy pyramid shows the direction that energy flows, and each level of the pyramid is called a tropic level. Now, at the bottom of the tropic pyramid are producers. Producers are organisms that can make their own food, like plants. Next are your consumers who need to consume other organisms for energy. We can have primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. And then we have our decomposers, which return nutrients to the soil by consuming waste and dead organisms. So if you notice, if you look at the numbers here, we go from 100% to 10% to 1% to 0.1% to 0.01%. Now, every level that you go up into the pyramid, we are losing a consistent amount of energy every time we go up. But all of this energy is going to be lost as heat. Now, not all of the energy generated or consumed in one trophic level will be available to the organisms in the next higher trophic level. Only 10% of energy stored as biomass is in a trophic level, is passed from one level to the next. So this is known as the 10% rule, and it limits the number of trophic levels an ecosystem can support. So where does the other 90% go? At each level, some of the biomass consumed is excreted as waste. Some energy is changed to heat and therefore unavailable for consumption. During respiration, and some plants and animals die without being eaten, meaning their biomass is not passed on to the next consumer. Organisms have close relationships with other organisms within an ecosystem. This relationship is also known as symbiosis. Now, we have three different types. First, we have mutualism, which is when both species benefit from the relationship. Second, we have parasitism, which is when one organism is helped and the other organism is harmed. And then finally, we have commensalism, which is when one organism benefits and there's no harm or benefit to the other organism. So this image shows the relationship between bees and flowers. The bees benefit from the pollen and nectar they gather from the flowers, and the flowers benefit by the bees transporting their pollen and pollinating other flowers. What type of symbiosis do you think this represents? Next, this image shows the relationship between some shark species and pilotfish. Pilotfish will feed on the leftovers in the water after the shark makes a kill, while the shark remains unaffected by this behavior. What type of symbiosis does this example represent? This image shows the relationship between a mosquito and a human. A mosquito will drink human blood for nutrients and leave the human with a nasty itch. What type of symbiosis does this example represent? Relationships exist among all living things. However, when one thing is out of balance, it can affect the entire ecosystem. For example, pesticides are chemicals that can upset a delicate ecosystem. They can cause one population to soar and another to die out. So, if one component of the ecosystem dies out, it may create a chain reaction that affects other organisms in that ecosystem. Now, here is something I want you to consider. After everything you've learned today about ecosystems and symbiosis, here is what I want you to consider. Is your belly button its own ecosystem?